Hello, everyone. I'm Rhett Power, your host. I am the CEO of Accountability Inc., which is an executive coaching firm and also a columnist at Forbes. And it is a great pleasure to be here today with you at the Within Summit 2023. It's brought to you by Within Health, and this is the final session of the day. So thank you for sticking with us because you do not want to miss this next 45 minutes because I've got a dynamic duo here that we're going to learn from and learn some really fun things about. We're having a really great discussion. I'm really excited about it. But we've got one more day of programming here at the Within Summit, and you can go to the link. I think the link is going to be put in the chat and in the chat. Register for that final day because again, wonderful lineup for you tomorrow that you can learn from and really and I think you actually get credit for continual learning for this summit. So make sure to get your to sign up and get your continuing learning credits for that. Now I've got Dr. Jessica DeVinto and Zubin, and she is a licensed clinical psychologist. She's serving as the global head of mental health at YouTube. She's a leading product and content partnerships and serving as a subject matter expert across policy, product, and marketing. Prior to this role, she served as the chief mental health advisor for employees at YouTube. She is her clinical career was primarily in university health, where she provided direct clinical services for a decade and also served as a director of clinical training, working at several Bay Area universities. She specializes in anxiety, grief, crisis stabilization, young adult identity development, and trauma. And we've also got Marjorie Morrison. She is the CEO and co-founder of PsychHub, the world's largest mental health education and connection platform. She's a visionary, passionate pioneer in the mental health space. She co-founded PsychHub with former Congressman and someone I've worked with before, Congressman Patrick Kennedy. He and I are both former Peace Corps volunteers, so I love Patrick. But her mission is to connect with people with engaging, evidence-based content on mental health topics, delivered in many ways to meet learners where they're at. Morrison is reimagining behavioral health through intentional and thoughtful design by leveraging the digital space and combining clinical research with the art of storytelling. It is great to have you guys. We have a ton of questions. We're going to talk today about empowering the potential of evidence-based information and care, leveraging YouTube for expertise amplification. Let's start with you, Jessica, and talk about how YouTube can effectively serve as a platform for sharing evidence-based information, particularly in fields like mental health and behavioral health.
Yeah, absolutely. So we actually have what's called a health shelf that helps consumers make informed decisions about the speaker of the mental health content they're consuming, or any health content for that matter. And we actually worked with the World Health Organization and the National Academy of Medicine to define kind of a criteria for people to meet that threshold to be like an accredited health source on our platform. And so this includes, health agencies, major hospitals. It includes nonprofit organizations with experts leading on mental health. It includes educational organizations such as PsychHub is one of our authoritative health sources. It also includes individually licensed mental health professionals and physicians in the space. And we make sure that they're attesting to making sure all the content is reviewed by a licensed professional, as well as making sure the content is evidence-based on their channel and primarily health-related. And so when you see that shows up on our health shelf, but also at the video level, there's a label that lets you know the source of the content. And there's like a little blue bar that lets you know the authoritative nature. And so that's the way we do it, and helps users to understand who the speaker is.
It also helps fight misinformation, right? Which I think in this day and age, is a really, really important subject that I think all platforms are struggling with. So that's really amazing that YouTube is leading on that. Marjorie, what is the role of Psych Hub for online practitioners in your view?
It's a great question. We really believe, I say we, Patrick and I really, we co-founded Psych Hub on sort of the thesis of trying to move behavioral health providers really from generalists to specialists. So about 70% of practitioners who are mental health providers are master's level like me, and we're trained as generalists. But today we now know that, we don't treat an eating disorder the same as we would complicated grief or depression or addiction or anxiety. There are different insomnia, right? There's different interventions that have been proven through evidence to be more effective. We're not really taught that in school, which is kind of a crazy thing to think of. So we set out to develop Psych Hub as a way to try to upskill providers to get them to use these evidence-based practices and to really kind of specialize out their craft. And when we think about specialization, it's not just symptoms, it's also ages. Early childhood, people that treat, early childhood and adolescence is very different than seniors. It's also communities, things like LGBTQ, BIPOC, Latinx, caregivers, veterans. So we believe that it's been proven actually, right? that when providers are using these evidence-based practices, everyone wins. And that means that the consumer, which is what we call the patient, the client, the member, whatever you want to call it, we call it the consumer of mental health, gets better symptom reduction because they're actually getting care from a provider using evidence-based interventions. The provider themselves has a lot less burnout. I did private practice for over a decade. It's exhausting. Every hour, someone comes in with something different, and you really have to be a jack of all trades. And it's kind of ridiculous. Like I often say, you wouldn't go to a cardiologist for a broken foot, but like that is what we do in mental health. And so, so there's a lot less burnout because you're really honing your craft. And then there's a total cost of care savings because time and time again, it's been proven that when people get good mental health care, they stay out of the larger health system. So it's a win-win across the board. Everybody wants us and, transformation to happen. It's just hard. It's a slog. It's a battle every day to really get providers to say, you should be doing it. But that's our core thesis of why we exist. But we also know that not only do you have to train these practitioners, you have to train the whole ecosystem because most people don't even know about evidence-based practices, and how would they know? And then the other piece of it is like, not everybody's going to end up going to a mental health provider. So how do we all get trained up to be able to support? And not everybody needs to go, right? So, that's why people ask me all about like digital apps and this. Like, I'm excited about the idea that people could have different things that might help them at different times in their life, And so I think all of this evolution of digital tools is exciting, but we also the whole ecosystem needs to get trained up on how to support those around them. And that means employees, that means family members, that means parents, kids, friends, siblings. And a lot of that can happen on YouTube where consumers are going to consume information. So YouTube actually plays a really critical role in what we're trying to do indirectly by educating consumers about what kind of care they should be looking for.
And Marjorie, I'm so glad you brought that up because we had over 25 billion views on mental health content alone in 2021.
Wow.
And so we know that consumers are coming to YouTube both to learn about what is it like to live with XYZ condition, but signs and symptoms, how to get help, how do I know I need a professional, how to help a friend, how do I talk with somebody else who I know is struggling, parents, looking for information for their kids. And so I love it that organizations like Psych Hub are putting the psychoeducational content up because consumers are looking for that. And a lot of times that self-exploration is that first stop along the mental health journey. And certainly it can help reduce stigma. It normalizes the conversation. It helps folks feel less alone in the process, and it can drive help-seeking behavior if and when they might need it.
And I shouldn't quote stories I don't know. Sorry to interrupt you, but I have to pull up. I just read another story that showed in healthcare. So we're making the dog learn to behavioral. When consumers are informed and they make informed decisions about their healthcare, they have much better success. So, you can translate that to mental health care. Like if people feel empowered and they're deciding, I want CBT or I want DBT or I, want this kind of care, they're more of an active part of it. So that's how else are they going to learn? They're going to YouTube.
Well, I mean, healthcare is one of those things, right? I've had, I had a child that had some health issues, and it helped me learn the questions to ask, right? Right. So that I could be a better advocate for my son. And so I think it plays a huge role in understanding what's going on to get answers maybe you didn't know to ask when you were in those situations. I think it's really exciting. I agree with both of you. What are some examples of successful YouTube channels that from creators who are effectively leveraging the platform? Do you have any examples that you can share with us?
I mean, well, kind of elephant in the room here. Psych Hub is one of those examples. Marjorie, I think your organization has only been posting content for us for what, 3 years?
Yeah.
And you have over 1 million subscribers now to your channel and exponential number of views on the content that you're creating. And Psych Hub has leaned in both to long form content as well as short form content, and has really grown organically on YouTube, and really is a success story. And what I love, and Margie can speak about this more, of course, but what I love about Psych Hub is the content is animated so it can control for diversity factors so folks can see themselves reflected in the content, and really is sort of appropriate for a wide range of ages and literacy levels because it really breaks it down piecemeal. Other examples, we have individual license providers, like there's a channel that I love, Therapy in a Nutshell, which really breaks down. She does a lot of like coping skills, which I love, as well as sort of explainer videos and other psychoeducational content. And then we work with nonprofits like NAMI and the JED Foundation. And we also see other health channels like the American Academy of Pediatrics creating mental health content specifically for youth, which I love. And they have a series called Asking for a Friend that I like a lot. That's really approachable and accessible to the teen population. So anyway, I could go on and on, but I'll pause.
What are the demographics of you said you had all these looks last year, right? What are the demographics of that? Is it younger people? Is it what does that look like?
There's limited information I can share there, but what I can say is that the majority of our viewers on mental health content really range from ages like 18 to 45. That's the bulk. And that is going to vary channel by channel, of course, based on the population that they appeal to. What we see for Gen Z is more interested. They're open to the idea of talking about mental health, but I think a lot of authoritative content on mental health is just really dry and not engaging for like the Gen Z population. And so when you think about where their eyeballs are at, I'll give an example that we just had. Like, they're going to be watching sports, and they're going to be watching fashion creators, and they're going to be watching gaming creators. So we have gaming creators like Markiplier and things like that who are talking about mental health in an open and inclusive way. And even like with sports, the NFL just for World Mental Health Day on Tuesday published a playlist of NFL players sharing their stories. And so when they see people sort of that they relate to in their sort of sphere of reference, whatever you want to say that, I think it really just breaks the stigma, and it helps the content be a lot more approachable. And a lot of these personal stories content are really resonating with that younger population as well as older generations.
That's amazing. I mean, I love that how they're reaching people where they are and with the people who influence them, right? I think that's brilliant.
Yeah.
So in terms of Psych Hub, to talk about how you came up with this idea. I'm just curious how you and Patrick sort of saw this need. Where did that come from? Like,
well, it started when I was 5. No, I'm kidding. So when I graduated college and I went to grad school, and I was a licensed marriage family therapist, and I'm also a licensed professional clinical counselor. Spent time in private practice. Then I went and started working with the Marine Corps, and I got an opportunity there to develop and then implement a proactive counseling program, both individual and group. That we started with drill instructors and scaled it from there. after that got scaled, I started a nonprofit called Psych Armor, which is online education in the military veteran space. And default, crazy longer story than we have time for about how I ended up starting a nonprofit in online ed, because I didn't know about online ed, but there was no place really for civilians to learn about military veterans.
Mhm.
All that to say, in that process, if you guys remember when the VA Phoenix fictitious waitlist scandal happened, do you remember that? Well, within about a week, Congress initiated the opportunity for veterans to go out and use their VA benefits and get community care. And in that community care, I think it was at the time, if they had to wait more than 30 days and live more than like 40 miles, or maybe those are vice versa, that they could use community. So all of a sudden there was this need to like, okay, how do we train up community, the providers out in the community of how to treat PTSD? And my nonprofit got the, through, just work I'd already done it with the military, got the opportunity to get that contract. And at the time, that's the other thing about evidence-based intervention. They change over time too. So that's why you really just have to be current. At the time, the evidence-based intervention for PTSD was cognitive processing therapy and prolonged exposure. A little bit hard to say which one works better for the others. And so we started building both those two courses for these providers. And we were like amazed at how much better, year one out, veterans fared with symptom reduction being seen by providers that we were training. And we weren't doing intensive training. It was online. It was, it was just kind of like, but what it really showed us, right, was like the baseline's low. So some tools in the toolbox to kind of weave in with your style made a huge difference. And so to me, it was pretty obvious, like, wow, we could take what we're doing with PTSD and scale it to all areas of behavioral health. I'm laughing because we have an ongoing joke with Patrick. If you talk to him, he's going to say it's his idea. We had already agreed on doing a business together. So you're getting me and I'm telling you that I approached him, but he'll tell you, the Kennedy family is all about education and whatnot. And so, but yeah, that was really it. Was like, we thought, well, everyone would win if we could do it. So that was the impetus. Long story there, but that was how we got there.
No, it's always interesting to understand people's journey, right, to where they are. And it sort of leads into a great question about content creators and healthcare professionals. I mean, do you have to be in this day and age, or what's a good strategy here? If you're a healthcare provider, do you really need to learn content and how to deliver it and how to create it? Or is partnering with a really good content creator the way to go? I'm just kind of curious what you guys have seen as in terms of being effective, because not everybody's great on camera, not everybody's dynamic and energetic. And so, but if you have, if you're a healthcare provider and you want to share your expertise and share your knowledge and help people, how's the best way to do that?
Well, honestly, I think both avenues are really valid here. If you are getting feedback from peers that you are a really great, public speaker and you're really engaging, and you get large audiences that come see you in public spaces, that's probably a good sign that you just going in front of a camera, you can start that off. I will say, the quality kind of develops over time, and there are tips and tricks on how to get started, which I'll talk about in a moment, on how to kind of learn those things. And you probably need a good editor or know basic editing. Like I personally do not. So I would have to rely on an editor myself. But getting started that way, it can take, a good year of consistent posting, though, to build an audience base if you're going out and doing this on your own as a licensed provider. But it is so worth it in the long run, because then you develop a community. Then you can even monetize and start making money on the channel. If you're really hoping to get content out there, but you're not so sure about your public speaking abilities or not so sure about how to create content that's engaging, partnering with a nonprofit who's already doing it is a great way to go. So working for a company like Psych Hub, or getting involved with NAMI, the JED Foundation, 988 Lifeline, basically any of the big nonprofits who are creating content on YouTube, they're probably one of our one of our partners in the space already. And they usually have their own processes in place on how they develop content, quality checks. Like PsychHub has some of the highest quality checks of any of our partners, just as an example. And then if you're really not sure to get started, actually PsychHub and YouTube are partnering together to bring to the public a masterclass. And it's going to teach things on like how to get started on YouTube, how to leverage, how to optimize metadata and search engine optimization, tips and tricks on how to understand what kind of content the audience is looking for. And that's going to be December 4th. I'm just thinking of signups. Marjorie, did we have a process for folks to sign up yet?
We announced it this week in Health. I got so many names and I don't know how. They're all in my email. So we were going to do a Google form before this and we didn't do it. So what if
what if they put their email in the chat?
How about if you put your email in the chat? It's a free thing. And really the reason why we're doing it is this is an area where like everyone wins, right? We want to elevate more evidence-based channels. It doesn't mean that, PsychHub, it's like one thing piece that we do, but the more that there's quality content in there, that pushes down sort of that misinformation you said, and that there's more opportunities, because really, honestly, there isn't one size fits all. So different people like to learn from different audiences. Like Jessica said, like we animate because of what we do, and we have a lot of government partners. We have to have the highest clinical rigor. Like we have people that look at every piece of our content from a different lens. We have different lenses, whether it's Black, brown, LGBTQ. I mean, just because you just never know. And she's right. We use animation for the vast majority of ours because we can control accents and everything diversity, right? We do color, clothing, size, gender. There are all kinds of age that go into it. All of that to say, like, that's a style. Some other people might really identify with a person that's like, that's the, one of the channels that we all just love is Dr. Mike, and I got to meet him. Mm-hmm. and he's a personality. He's just so good, so engaging and caring. So that's why we kind of feel like the more the merrier. We're kind of all in this together, and we're in a mental health crisis. So the more we can help people along the way, the better. We're really, and I will also say, don't be intimidated. Don't be afraid. The greatest thing about YouTube is they call themselves the world's largest petri dish. You learn so much. Like if you pay close attention, you can iterate. Like we started doing some shorts. We did a bunch of stuff in Spanish. And so, you kind of, the audience will kind of start to tell you, right? Just where your sort of target market is.
And you can we have in YouTube Studio, that's the place where creators go to upload their content. We have a research tab that will actually give you information on the top subject areas for a particular search term. And so you can get an understanding of what people really are searching for. And if you can unlock a niche that people are looking for where there's a dearth of content, I mean, that's where you really win. Spanish, for example, we need a lot more Spanish content. And knowing the topic of this conference, we need more ARFID content, for example, or PICA. So these are just sort of examples of content areas folks can consider leaning into. I will say that when we started the health vertical, this was three or so years ago, we had an incredible dearth of high quality and engaging disordered eating content on our platform. And we have worked with hospitals and nonprofit organizations since then to fill those content gaps. And now when you search for, anorexia, bulimia, binge eating disorder, you get actually really robust results now and really, really high quality health shelves. But that is years and years in the making. And so we can still go farther, and there's always going to be more work to do. That was a bit of a ramble, but
what works better? Is it long form, short form? Is it, I hear a lot in my coaching business oh, you've got to be under a minute. You've got to do the YouTube shorts, or there's another school of thought. Oh, you got to do the evergreen content that's interview style or whatever. So what really works?
Honestly, it really depends. It depends on what your style is, and it depends on who your end user is. Certainly, younger people are really heavy consumers of short form videos, and I think those are great for the top 3 tips of addressing anxiety, or here's a quick grounding exercise that you can practice, or what is self-compassion, in a minute, just really quick bite size. But the optimal kind of time frame for long form video tends to be like 3 to 5 or 3 to 8 minutes for longer form video, unless you're doing something like a podcast. Podcasts are really popular. People really love podcasts. PsychHub has a podcast even.
And
those are obviously 30 minutes to an hour. Yeah.
I was just remembering when you said that, actually PsychHub is launching a new podcast like really soon, and I don't know the exact date. I'm really a wealth of information here, but I'm hosting it, but I'm really, really, really excited about it. It is for mental health practitioners. And we're bringing in just different subject matter experts to talk about different evidence-based practice, like, an expert in autism and in OCD and in, eating disorders and stuff. And then they can go on to our platform and take a quiz after they listen to it and then get their CEs. But we will put that on YouTube. So that will be on there too. And Jessica's right. We have 2 other podcasts on YouTube as well.
Marjorie, you mentioned CEs, and that was music to my ears. So I'm going to be listening to all of them.
I'm so excited about it because I think, the audience here are providers. Back in the day when we started PsychHub, most therapy was 5 years ago was face-to-face. COVID happened and everything went, virtual. Now people don't want to sit on their computers necessarily and watch a course. So we're trying to kind of meet people where they're at. Like, why not be able to go for a walk or while you're in the car and listen to it as an interview? And we'll also record the video of it. But I'm so excited. We just picked our first 12, I think 10 or 12 first episodes. And the other thing we're going to do, you're hearing it all here first for the first time, is those subject matter experts. And this is a way that we feel like we can help both sides. They're going to do at the, while we're doing it at the end, something for YouTube that's consumer facing, like top 10 things that people need to know about whatever it is that subject is, so that we're able to, again, reach both audiences. But it's, I was super passionate about wanting to do this. I think it'll be really good.
So what's in terms of content, how important is storytelling, and doing that really effectively? Because it seems to me that that's a really key part of grabbing people's attention and holding that attention in the world that we live in today. Like, talk about storytelling in terms of maybe even your podcast, or maybe who does that effectively on YouTube in terms of this kind of information?
Yeah, I will say storytelling is definitely one style on how to convey content across. And we see it show up actually a lot in personal stories. And we actually have a personal stories shelf, which is lay folks, and we have a harm rubric that we apply to it to make sure it's authentic, first person, and not harmful content that shows up on these personal stories shelves. So when you search for anxiety, depression, and you're scrolling with your mobile phone, a horizontal carousel will show up that says personal stories. And those are so incredibly powerful for younger folks, but also for folks to feel seen and heard, and to feel less alone in their journeys, and to kind of know what to expect in their journeys and see what works for other folks. I will say storytelling from authoritative sources we see less often, but those can be really powerful. There's one video in particular. It's by the World Health Organization. It's actually about 10 years old, if you can believe it, but it's one of our top viewed mental health videos, even to this day. Like, year over year, it continues to garner this viewership, and it's called A Black Dog Named Depression. And so
Wow.
it uses this story about a black dog and a man's relationship to it as an illustration of his relationship with depression and what that's like for him. And so anyway, it's beautiful. You all should go check it out. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's funny, I was mentioning earlier, like I'm about to graduate from a year-long fellows program called the Dial Fellows that is all about storytelling. And I've learned so much, and it's really about how do you use your voice for good, right? Like how do you elevate, because people will start tuning out things too, right? Like how are you focused on impact, on the impact that you want, and using your voice from there. Patrick will say, it's funny, we've given him so many shout outs on this, but he would tell you that people they don't remember anything but the stories. They remember the stories that that you tell, because it sort of takes them there with you, and you have to weave your messaging in that story. It's hard. It's an art form. I public speak like almost every week, so I'm always trying to do it. And I think the more humility and humble you can be and authentic, the more you're able to share stories, and especially if they're personal stories, and how people relate to them. I think that takes a lot of confidence and a lot of experience, because it's really hard to be vulnerable if you don't have that confidence, right? So it's kind of like a reverse, right? The more confident you are, the more you're able to say, yeah, I don't really know how I didn't know what I was doing, and this happened, and as a result that happened. So the more honest and authentic you could be, I think the more people connect with you. I don't know, would you agree with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we find that feedback consistently on our platform, that authentic, heartfelt, vulnerable content does play really well to audiences. Um, and you see it show up in the comments space. Thank you so much. I feel very similarly. I've experienced something similar. This saved my life. You see a lot of that kind of commentary on mental health content. You don't know how much I needed to hear this today. And so certainly it can be very powerful.
When you guys hit on it a few minutes ago, a little while ago, but I want to go back to tailoring evidence-based content to reach different demographics and communities effectively. What let's go deeper into that question, because I know you have a lot of people out here listening, a lot of practitioners listening. They say, I've wanted to do a podcast, or I've wanted to do, some video work on, and put out more social media. And how much do they really need to think about their audience and who they're reaching, and what are some strategies they need, or some questions they need to ask themselves about that?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and I feel like I could do an entire session just on that topic. But I think, who is your target demographic? If it's Gen Z, and a lot of the examples that you're using in your content are at college level literacy levels, using a lot of clinical jargon, or talking about, marriage and kids and workplace, it's not going to resonate with the younger population. Younger users, for example, the content needs to be created for youth, in partnership with youth, or by youth. For example, we hear that from our younger audiences time and time again. Use us, leverage us in developing this content if you want it to land with us. And so I think a lot of creators who don't do that and are trying to reach Gen Z are sort of missing the boat. Other kind of communities, thinking about, for example, like the Black community, integrating sort of aspects of spirituality is really important, as well as other determinants of health, to make sure that the community aspect is really met and upheld in the content development process. I think just thinking about what the values are for a particular community, or particular sort of intersection of mental health with certain salient identities is really important. And also thinking about the representation of the speakers in the video content. If you're talking about a certain intersection, is that intersection actually represented in the speakers that are being portrayed? This is why, for example, PsychHub's content, they use such a diverse representation of speakers, and sort of different representations in how people dress and how people appear and skin tone and things in their animations, that it reaches a very wide audience base. And they have, they don't just have one anxiety video. I don't know how many you have by now, Marjorie, but you probably have 50 anxiety videos.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
I thought about that earlier. We've chosen when we develop our videos to go into like a rabbit hole, right? So we start with the general information and then we go deep from there. Like it can be, what is anorexia, and then treatment types for anorexia, and then how to support someone for anorexia. And then we know from our own platform analytics and from YouTube analytics, like how people are watching things. So you start to be able to see like, what's needed. So ours kind of build on each other. When you ask that, what's the sweet spot of time? I think the way we approach it is we don't want people to have to waste their time learning about something they're not interested in. Said differently, we want to serve up information exactly of what you're interested in, which means that we can't put everything under the kitchen sink in a video. We got to be very focused, and then from there bring in other ones. That's what she was saying, like a bunch of different ones on anxiety, because how deep do you want to go? Or are you like, okay, actually anxiety is not it, maybe it's depression, like you want to. So that's how we've tackled it.
And for folks who are doing longer videos, there are tips and tricks on how to optimize performance for those videos as well, like introducing chapters. And then you can make sure to outline those chapters in the video description so that will actually show up in the different search queries. It'll be identified in various search queries, as well as help people navigate. Like, I'm not really interested in the signs and symptoms, but I really want to know what to do to help somebody. I can just jump to that section and not have to watch the full 30-minute clip.
That's really important. My editor at Forbes, I remember him saying to me, spend as much time on your title as you do on your content. It seems like this is sort of that, where you really have to get proficient at labeling or titling your work and writing those descriptions really well and being very, very, very specific. I guess that holds true, I guess, is what you're saying.
We've changed.
Yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead, Marjorie.
I was just gonna say, we have changed titles before, just because to your point, it wasn't capturing the real essence of the video.
Like in some channels, for example, they'll launch a video series, and the title for every video is the title of the video series, but then who they're bringing on or the purpose of the content sort of gets buried behind, and then you only get a certain amount of text that you can see, like on mobile or on desktop, right, to consume the content. And so we actually say, flip it in a lot of instances. Put sort of the topic at the front, put whoever the host is, if it's somebody famous that you're hosting, in there kind of early on as well. And then put the name of the series maybe towards the end. And then making sure that you're optimizing the metadata to do hashtags on the certain key topics that go across, and then writing a video description that's really, you have to think about how people are searching and looking for certain types of content, like how are people going to find this, and then tailoring video descriptions and titles to meet those top queries. And again, that research tab on YouTube Studio is one way to find out what people are searching for.
I do want to say to people, if you have questions, we've got about 10 minutes left. Please ask your questions. You certainly welcome questions from the audience. And one question that sort of we really didn't get into, but I want to bring up while people are thinking about their questions, and that is the ethics around this. Were there any ethical conversations or considerations or challenges that YouTube and PsychHub has around medical information online? I know the verification that it's in vetted sources, but are there any other concerns or things that you worry about here?
I mean, from a YouTube perspective, it's a lot about misinformation, and we have policies in place to remove misinformation as well as to reduce lower quality content in our algorithms. So those are two ways that we address that. And then in regards to ethics, we also, making sure people put on there, this is not to take place of professional advice. This is, it doesn't constitute a doctor-patient relationship. this is psychoeducational. And a lot of our evidence-based, high quality, authoritative partners, when they create the content, they're putting these caveats in place. When people come out and start to make really broad-based claims like this is the cure for anxiety, or all people with depression should try this, then those are not going to be kind of credible in our eyes. And so those channels are not going to be able to get our certification, as an example.
That's great, actually.
Yeah, and I have to say, YouTube really does care. I mean, we put our emphasis there because they do really care. That's why they did these health shelves, right? Like there's a real, I mean, that's why they have positions like Jessica's. It's not just like rhetoric. I mean, they actually really do care about the quality. So there's, I would imagine, a lot of, ethics in place. For us, it's a lot of our clients, right? We have big clients, big Fortune 10 companies. And, I mean, you cannot do business with these large corporations if you are not checking every box, dotting every I. And so, earlier Jessica said one of her favorite channels is this therapist that, gives tips and everything. Like I remember when we did our first, it was like 3 years in, we did our first video that we actually gave like suggestions of things to do. That's how careful we've been on this. Is just education, information. We're not even going to say, here's meditation or, and so, but yeah, I think that we all take this stuff really seriously because people's lives are at stake, and listen, no matter how great something is, it's not going to be great for everyone. It's just not. Just like you go on an antibiotic, that antibiotic isn't going to cure everything. There's a lot of different antibiotics. Some are, better for other things. So we all have to be really careful about making sure that we're explaining this may or may not work for you. And by the way, if it works for you, it may not work for you next year. I mean, our situations are different too.
How do we get that word out, Jessica, because I think people, and there's so much information out there, and there are the people out there that say, this is the cure-all for this. How do we help the public distinguish between what's credible and what's not? I mean, this certification or this vetting exists, and YouTube's doing a great job, but I think we often still fall prey to that because that stuff is clickbait, right? It gets your attention by making these bold claims. How do you still fight that? Is there,
certainly through misinformation, any content, that could be harmful, for example, is going to be removed. And then I think a lot of it has to do with actually educating parents, clinicians, and educators about and children about digital literacy and how to consume content. YouTube, for example, launched a misinformation campaign during COVID, which is like, if it feels fishy or if it doesn't feel like, it's too good to be true, then it probably is. And so like how to identify who a credible source is, how to think through and objectively think through, claims that are made to be more kind of, I guess, logical about sort of the thought process there on whether or not it's credible information or not. But it is an uphill battle, and it isn't unique to YouTube either. I mean, this is an issue that we see sort of, across media. Yeah.
And in many ways, not just health, right? In all kinds of ways.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think consumers are getting savvier. I look at my kids and like they're in their 20s and they're pretty savvy whether or not they're going to a restaurant. I mean, where they're going to eat and reviews, and then what they're looking at pictures of, what people liked and, what wine to order. And I do think some of that stuff is starting to move into their physical health as well as their mental health. I mean, people are starting to realize that it's their body and it's their money and their choices, and they got to own it. There's no just like someone's going to come in and tell you exactly what to do. So hopefully that continues, right? Informed consumers are a win-win, I think, for everyone.
So let's wrap up. We've got about 5 minutes left. And so I wanted to get sort of a last word in from each one of you. what are your big takeaways from this conversation for people, for creators, for healthcare professionals who want to put themselves out there and share their knowledge and their expertise to help their their patients, but the community as a whole? What is your biggest advice for them, and where can they get started? Like,
Yeah, I mean, my biggest advice is please try. If you have it,
okay,
we need more people doing this, and I think a lot of providers have a lot of barriers to do it. Time, time is a big barrier. Resources are a big barrier, and just confidence is a big barrier. But really, all it takes to really just get started, to see kind of where it goes, is thinking of a few topics with a few key takeaways. People like lists, for example, lists of 3, lists of 5, and starting off on shorts. It's really easy. It does not take a high production value. I know earlier I said get a good editor. For shorts, it really doesn't matter as much. And just doing face to camera and then playing out with a couple of different videos and seeing what lands. For shorts, though, I will say you need to grab somebody's attention within the first 3 seconds or else they'll swipe. So it's a little tricky in that way. But in regards to if you have a good message to share and you're really resonating with what people are looking for, younger users have less stigma about talking about mental health than older generations. And they're starting to expect mental health to be part of the everyday normal conversation. And so they're open to hearing these messages.
so I'm going to age myself a little bit, and I was going to say, well, people our age, I'll put ourselves in sort of the same age bracket. Do young people listen to people our age? Can we effectively reach that group of young people?
I mean, certainly if your target audience is going to be teens, I would consult with a teenager on creating the content. But certainly, I think, they have so many trusted adults in their lives. In some cases, parents, not all the time, of course, coaches, teachers. There's usually some kind of a trusted adult in their life that they will listen to. It's just about making sure that they feel seen and heard and the content resonates with them. Again, if you're talking about like marriage and kids and paying taxes and the stress,
Right.
worries about getting older, I think a lot of that content, it just sort of, that's not in their realm of possibility right now. And so when you talk about like dating and the first breakup and test anxiety and bullying and loneliness and saying no to peer pressure, I feel like these are topics that are going to resonate better with the younger population. So just put yourself in the target audience you're trying to reach, whether it's an older or younger audience. Think about what is going to be important and values based for them, and then thinking about creating content around those concepts is important.
That's great. That's true. So true. And Marjorie, I give you the last word.
Come to Psych Hub. No, I mean, I think, listen, I run a company that does that sells subscriptions to evidence-based practice for everyone. So I'd say when you ask the question, where should they go, I'd say that. But with that said, it goes tying all this together. It's, where do you feel safe getting information? Where do you feel, everybody reads different newspapers and journals, and I have my my listservs I get in the morning, and I read the ones that I think give me valuable information. I think that we're in an interesting time. I know we talk a lot about stigma. When I was working with the military, we had real stigma. I mean, it was real. Those people, they were the population I was working with, had to have had deployments during the Iraq and Afghanistan war. It was really hard for them to go get help. So we had to bring it to them. Now I think we're seeing over stigma, and it's not uncommon for most people to share with you that they have a diagnosis. And there's a lot of diagnosis going on. Not that they don't have it, but where can we go to say, just because I have this ADHD or I suffer from depression, how do I use that to build resilience and to, be that best person that I can, instead of being like, sorry, I can't go. I have depression. I don't want to, I just don't want to feel not good. Like, I think so I say all that, that's may not be a popular stance, but I do think that we have to be careful to not over pathologize everything right now. I'm thrilled that mental health is conversations at the table. I think it's great. But and Jessica, you probably know what I'm talking about. There's a lot of pathologizing. So we want to be able to help people like have like, in the military we called it post-traumatic growth, right? Like, how do we build resilience instead of make people feel debilitated? And I guess I would say wherever you feel like you're going to get help to be able to do that, that's where you should be getting your information from and learning from, and helping those around you, because we can all grow and we all learn how to cope with different things.
Well, this is great advice. Thank you guys so much. I know you have a master class coming up. You can we've got an email, Alana Garrett, Lana Garrett at google.com, and you can send your email to her and she'll get you signed up for that masterclass. Is that right, Marjorie or Jessica?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, good. And look, thank you so much for spending some time with us today. We are the Within Summit 2023. You can sign up at the website withinsummit.com. And we've got another full day tomorrow of content that is just going to be something you can't miss. So please join us. And you guys have a good afternoon, rest of your day. And we'll see you tomorrow.
Thanks so much for having us.